Okay, let's unpack this. Have you ever had genuinely good intentions? Maybe you're trying to be kind or show appreciation, and somehow,
Mm.
well, it just creates an awkward situation for someone else.
Oh, definitely. It happens all the time, doesn't it? Your internal feeling, your sincerity, it doesn't always land the way you planned. Perception's a tricky thing.
Totally. And that kind of universal experience is actually um, a great starting point for this fascinating story we're diving into today. It's from some ancient text, involves faith, a bit of a social mishap, actually.
Right.
And it leads to a teaching from the Buddha that really cuts deep into the spiritual path.
Yeah, we've been looking at these excerpts detailing the story of a really devout Brahmin and a group of monks. It's found in commentaries connected to the Dhammapada.
So our mission, really, in this deep dive is to explore this whole story, get a feel for the characters, the sort of cultural backdrop, the misunderstanding that popped up because of this Brahmin's devotion, and then see how the Buddha used it, how he turned it into the springboard for a really profound lesson, hopefully giving us and you some powerful insights into like perception, devotion, and the actual effort needed on the path.
Yeah, it's quite a tale.
Okay, so the sources introduce us to this Brahmin. He's described as having abundant faith or being greatly devoted. The Pali term is Pasādabahula. What do we know about this guy?
Well, he's clearly been deeply moved by the Buddha's teaching. I mean, so much so that his faith pushes him to do something pretty significant.
Which is?
He sets up a daily alms offering at his home, specifically for 16 monks. This isn't just a one-off thing. It's a serious, ongoing commitment.
16 monks every day. Wow. That's providing their daily meal, day in, day out. And the sources describe how he interacts with them when they arrive, right? He greets them with huge reverence.
Yeah.
Uses specific language.
Yes, exactly. He would address them saying things like, "Come, venerable Arahants," and "Sit, venerable Arahants." He consistently uses this term, Arahants.
Arahants, referring to those who've reached full liberation.
Right. Those who are fully enlightened.
And, okay, here's where it gets complicated, isn't it? Because not all 16 monks were at that level. They weren't all Arahants. The sources point out there were kind of two different groups among them.
Exactly. Some were still considered, well, ordinary people. The Pali term is Puthujanas. They hadn't actually reached any stage of awakening yet.
Okay, so when they heard the Brahmin call them Arahants, what was their reaction, according to the source material?
Well, they thought, he perceives us as Arahants. For them, it felt like a clear misperception on the Brahmin's part.
Oof. Like being called a world-class expert when you're like literally on day one of learning something?
Pretty much. It must have felt incredibly awkward, maybe even a bit embarrassing.
Yeah, I can imagine.
But then the sources also say that among the 16, there were some who actually were already taint-free ones, kasavas. That's another term for Arahants.
Okay, so actual Arahants were there too. What did they think when the Brahmin greeted them that way?
For them, the thought was different. It was, he knows our state of being taint-free. So for this group, it wasn't a misperception at all. The Brahmin was, in their view, correctly acknowledging their attainment.
Okay, so you've got one group feeling misidentified, the other feeling correctly identified. But the source says something really interesting happens next, regardless of which group they were in.
Right. It says all the monks felt uncomfortable or scrupulous. The term used is kukukayanta.
Kukukayanta, scrupulousness. What does that feel like? Is it like hesitation or unease? Maybe feeling like something's slightly off?
Yeah, the commentaries suggest it's that kind of feeling like impropriety or a mild sense of fault or just hesitation. Maybe for the ordinary monks, it was purely the discomfort of being labeled something they weren't.
Makes sense.
And maybe even for the actual Arahants, having their state publicly declared by a layperson like that felt maybe a bit unexpected. Or sensitive.
Yeah.
Whatever the exact flavor of discomfort was for each monk, the result, the source says, was the same for everyone.
And what was that result?
All 16 monks just stopped going to the Brahmin's house for their daily meal.
Oh, wow. That's a pretty big consequence for the Brahmin. He's there, presumably with food prepared, ready for 16 people, and nobody shows up anymore.
Yeah.
How did he react?
Yeah, exactly. The sources tell us he became really unhappy, quite dejected, described as having a mind afflicted by fault. He was distressed that his sincere act of devotion seemed to have just gone wrong somehow and stopped the monks from getting their meal?
He must have been totally confused.
Mhm.
I mean, he thought he was doing the most respectful thing possible, right?
Yeah.
Expressing his deep faith.
Completely. So where does he turn? What does he do?
He goes straight to the monastery,
Yeah.
pays his respects to the Buddha, and basically lays out the whole situation.
Yeah.
Reports that the monks have stopped coming, and he just doesn't get why.
Okay, so the Buddha hears the Brahmin's side of the story. What's his first move?
He calls the monks together, asks them point blank, "Why did you stop accepting alms at the Brahmin's house?"
And the monks, what do they say?
They explain. They tell the Buddha what the Brahmin had been saying, how he kept addressing them all as venerable Arahants. And they explain how that address made them feel uncomfortable, that sense of scrupulousness, the kukukrianta.
Okay, so now the Buddha has both perspectives. The devout layperson just trying to express his faith, and the monks reacting with this discomfort. How does the Buddha handle this specific situation?
Well, the source highlights a really crucial clarification the Buddha makes, specifically about the Brahmin speech. He explains that what the Brahmin was saying was speech due to devotion. The term is Pasādabahulabrāhmaṇavatthu, coming from a human being.
Ah, okay. So he's pointing to the intention behind it, the source of the words. It wasn't necessarily meant as like a technical diagnosis of each monk's attainment level,
Yeah, that's right.
but more an outpouring of the Brahmin's own deep faith in the state of Arahantship itself, which he then projected onto the monks through his greeting.
Precisely. He's validating the sincerity there, the Brahmin's devotional state. And then, this is really important, the Buddha clarifies the rule for the monks in this specific situation.
What does he say?
He states clearly that for the monks, there is no offense on appetite in receiving that kind of speech when it stems purely from devotion.
Ah, okay. So from a strictly disciplinary view, the monks weren't breaking any rules by accepting the alms, even with that form of address. And the Brahmin wasn't committing an offense either. The discomfort wasn't about a monastic rule violation.
Exactly right. The issue wasn't a technical breach. It was the reaction, the feeling prompted by the perception or the statement. And the Buddha then goes a step further, explaining the root cause of the Brahmin's specific language choice.
What was that?
He explains that the Brahmin had excessive love, adimatapames, for Arahants. His devotion was just so overflowing, his reverence for that ultimate state was so high that it naturally spilled out in how he addressed those he believed were on or had completed that path.
That makes a lot of sense, actually. It wasn't mean-spirited or even necessarily trying to pin a label on each monk factually. It was more like an expression of just overwhelming positive regard for the ideal of the Arahant.
Right. Coming straight from his deep faith.
Yeah.
But here's where the story takes this really powerful turn. And this is where it gets, I think, super fascinating.
Yeah.
The Buddha doesn't just sort out the immediate social awkwardness.
Okay.
He uses this whole incident, this discomfort born from devotion, as a direct teaching moment.
Teaching moment. For who?
The Brahmin.
No, that's the interesting part. He turns his attentions squarely onto the monks. Instead of dwelling more on the Brahmin's faith or the monks' feelings about it, he uses the whole situation to instruct the practitioners themselves about their own path.
Okay, so what's the core message he gives them?
It's incredibly direct. The Buddha basically says, therefore, it is fitting for you two, having cut the stream of craving, to attain just arahantship.
Wow. Okay, so he takes this seemingly kind of minor, almost awkward situation, right?
Figure.
Caused by someone else's devotion and her own internal reaction,
Yeah.
and flips it completely to redirect their focus onto the main goal of their practice, achieving liberation themselves. Forget how you're addressed, become the thing itself. Exactly. It's just, it's a masterclass in using an everyday event for profound spiritual instruction. He's essentially saying, look, stop getting tangled up in how others see you or the discomfort of being called this or that. Your real job, your actual work, is to become that state of liberation.
Mm-hmm. Powerful.
And the sources say he then wraps up this entire teaching, which was sparked by this incident, in a specific verse.
He does. The verse goes, Chindasota parakama, kame panuda Brahman, sohorana kayanyatpa, akatanyusi Brahman.
Okay, let's really break that verse down using the source's own explanation, because this holds the essence of that instruction for the monks. The first phrase is Chindasota parakama.
What's the significance of parakama here?
Right. The commentary makes a really crucial point about parakama. It means having striven greatly. And it explicitly says why this great striving is needed, because the stream of craving, tasotai, just cannot be cut with little effort. It's not a casual thing.
So it takes serious work. Serious work. It requires mahantena, parakamena, great effort, great striving. And importantly, this effort has to be accompanied by wisdom. It's not just brute force.
So the Buddha isn't talking about just wishing for it or putting in minimal effort. He's saying, with great wise effort, cut that stream of craving. And that connects directly back to the monk's task, not the Brahman's expression of faith.
Precisely. It grounds the teaching firmly in the active, demanding work of the practitioner. Then the next part of the verse is kamepanuda.
And the source explains this as dispelling, driving away sensual pleasures, or sometimes translated as cast out both, referring to internal and external sense pleasures, perhaps.
Right. This is a key part of cutting that stream of craving. You have to actively let go of attachment to sensory desires, the things we constantly chase after. It's another concrete instruction for the monk.
Makes sense. And then the verse addresses someone using the term Brahman. Now, the source clarifies how the Buddha is using this term in this specific context, right?
Yes, it does. The commentary points out that here, Brahman is being used as a way to address those who are taint-free, the Kesavas, the Arahants.
Wow.
So even though it was the Brahmin layperson whose actions kicked off the whole teaching, the verse itself is aimed at the striving practitioner, the one aiming for, or who has achieved, that state of liberation, who is the true Brahmin in the spiritual sense.
That's a really neat twist. It takes the term the layperson was using, maybe slightly awkwardly,
Yeah.
and reclaims it for the identity the practitioner should actually embody through their own effort. Okay, what about the next bit? Sokarana kayantva?
This translates as knowing the destruction of formations, and the source is specific here. It refers to knowing the destruction of the 5 aggregates.
The components of our conditioned existence?
Yeah,
Form, feeling, perception, mental formations, consciousness.
exactly. Understanding the impermanent and the ultimate ending of these building blocks of our experience, that's crucial wisdom on the path. And finally, the verse ends with Akatanyu si Brahma.
Which means,
You are one who knows the unmade. The commentary gives this beautiful explanation. It says this refers to knowing Nibbana or nirvana.
why the unmade?
Because Nibbana isn't fabricated. It's not made by pauses and conditions like literally everything else in the conditioned world is even something precious. Like gold, the commentary says, is still made. Nibbana is beyond that.
So knowing the unmade means knowing that ultimate, unconditioned reality of Nibbana, which is the end of suffering.
Exactly. That's the ultimate goal. So when you put the whole verse together, Chindasata parakama kamepanuda Brahman sakaranakayatva katanyusi Brahmana. It's this powerful call to action for the striving practitioner, the Brahmin of the verse.
Yeah.
Exert great effort. Cut craving stream, push away sensual desires, gain the wisdom of seeing the aggregates fall apart, and through all this become one who knows the unmade, Nibbana.
It brilliantly takes the Brahman's outward devotion, the monk's inward reaction, and just elevates the whole thing into a direct, actionable teaching focused squarely on the path of liberation. It completely shifts their attention.
Right. From the external interaction and their feelings about it back to their own internal work and the ultimate prize.
It really shows how the Buddha could just use any situation, couldn't he? Even a slightly cringy social moment as a skillful way to deliver the core message of the Dharma. Just incredible teaching skill.
It really is.
And what was the outcome? Did this teaching have an impact?
Oh, yes. The sources report that at the end of this discourse, many people who were listening attained various stages of awakening, starting with the fruit of stream entry, Sotapadaphaladini, and presumably others reaching higher stages too.
Wow. A direct result of turning that moment of social discomfort into a profound lesson on liberation. So, okay, pulling back. What does this story, this whole deep dive kind of mean for us, for you listening?
Well, it starts with something relatable, right? A layperson's genuine, sincere devotion, creating this unexpected ripple, this reaction. But the real juice, the core teaching, is about the inner work.
Yeah.
It's a powerful reminder, I think, that the external world, including how others perceive us or what they say to us, even with the best intentions, can actually be the very thing that pushes us back towards our own essential journey, what we need to do.
And it really leaves us with that central instruction from the verse, doesn't it? Framed by the Buddha, turning to the monks.
Yeah.
Are you truly applying great effort, Mahantena Parakamena, towards what really matters most in your life, whether that's spiritual growth or personal development or just any deeply held value?
Exactly. It encourages us to maybe look beyond the surface awkwardness that can happen in interactions and instead use those moments as prompts prompts to refocus on the fundamental, sometimes really difficult work that's required inside ourselves.
A lot to think about there, that idea of using external triggers for internal focus.
Indeed. It's a deep one.